And welcome to another episode of the Reg I and Rhoda podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Networks. Shout out to our producer extraordinaire, Dave Emmert, for making it all work like he does every episode. We appreciate that. Today, we're wrapping up our look back at 30 years ago when All Sports Radio WKNR began in 1991 in Cleveland, Ohio. This is part 3 of our conversation with the Dean of Sports, Greg Brinda, here on the R&R podcast. Michael, Greg, welcome back. So popular, the response has been overwhelming on social media with our listeners that 2 parts weren't enough, Greg Brinda and Michael Rega. We got to do one more. You guys ready for our final trip down memory lane?
Yeah, big ups.
Absolutely. Want to thank all of our fans in the Netherlands and in Portugal and and Istanbul and Taiwan. We thank you very much.
Iceland too, Greg. Had a few folks in Iceland asking me about you. So yeah, don't forget them.
He travels well, the Dean of Sports, Greg Brinda and Michael Rega. So one of the reasons we had to do a part 3 is, even though we tried, we're older and we forget a lot. I forgot so many people that used to be colleagues of ours back in the day, guys, that they responded on social media, and I was like, oh, shit, I forgot about Ryan McNaughton. How stupid do I feel right now? My buddy from Syracuse and everything like that. So I wanted to make sure we give a shout out to some of the other people we worked with, and then you guys can share some stories, and then we're going to get into your favorite callers over the years because the callers believe without them, we wouldn't have a show. So we've got to give them a shout out to the callers who joined us over the years. So real quickly, Ryan McNaughton, I apologize for forgetting you in the first couple of episodes. Let's see. Tim Alcorn worked with us briefly. He's now the radio voice of the Cavaliers. Doug Johnson was my intern at Cablevision. He's Mr. Pittsburgh Sports, some VP in TV, making more money than me, which pisses me off. He was my intern. So Doug, congratulations on that. Ron Glassnap. Greg, wasn't he your producer, Ron Glassnost?
Yeah, I used to call him Glasnost. Yes, Ron Glasnost. Yeah, from the old Russian thing. Yeah, Ron was a great producer. Loved him. Still going strong. Miami of Ohio guy, and really, really good guy.
Yep, had the post-game show.
Yeah,
and Cavaliers post-game shows that I did eventually. And now I agree. Always had his hand on it in the right way, and has been a big time success. And I believe he's still, isn't he management now at Bally Sports Ohio?
He's doing something over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah.
He's a big shot. So good for him. Bernard Perkenny, another producer over the years that was with us there. And he's moving back actually to the Cleveland area from out on the left coast in Seattle. So welcome back, Bernard. He listened to the first 2 parts. One of my all-time favorite guys, and I really feel stupid, Jimmy Christopher, one of the most laid back,
Saint, you ain't.
Yeah, the most laid back guy that ever did 2020 tickers in the history of 2020 tickers or radios anywhere. I felt so bad I had to just do this for Jimmy Christopher, guys.
Yeah, Jimmy was one of a kind, and I always loved every Christmas he'd come up with that wide-eyed look. He'd say, Reg, have a cool Yule. And I would just fall on the floor cracking up. He was, he took everything very seriously, but he had kind of this 50s and 60s beatnik way about him, Greg. You know?
That's right. Yeah. It was like, you know what? If I've always, prided myself in my early days of doing sportscasts, he's probably one of the most unique ticker guys we have ever heard, just because of his delivery. And, it's almost hard to describe him as a sports guy, but it came off great, didn't it?
Yep. No question about it. No question about it. Kenny, you worked with him and did shows with him, right?
Yeah, Jimmy, I was tickering with him, and I was hosting and he was tickering with me, so we worked together. And that's why I felt so bad after, listening to the first two podcasts we did about WKNR 30 years ago, 1991, and leading up the first 15 years. I was like, oh man, I forgot the Saint, Jimmy Christopher, and he left us, I think, for Dallas and was doing it at the Ticket in Dallas. And everything along those lines. So a shout out to the one, the only Jimmy Christopher for being one of the most unique and coolest dudes. Have a cool Yule, like Michael Regai said around Christmas time. Jimmy Christopher. So
he just celebrated an anniversary with the lovely Corinne. He's been married, I think, 29 years to Corinne. So good for Jimmy Christopher.
Now, good for him. And he's still in the business, I believe, as well. So yes, good for Jimmy.
I think down in Dallas.
Yeah. Pete DiDonato, one of our producers, and did a lot of stuff with the Indians. Got to give a shout out to Pete DiDonato. Jason Gibbs joined us, and he's with the Browns radio network now. Gibbsy joined us in 2004 and wore many hats over the years with WKNR. Daryl Ryder started doing updates way back in 1998. And he's now one of the Browns beat reporters at 92.3 The Fan, and does a great job on social media. Paul Fredericy. Do you guys remember Paul Fredericy?
I remember the name, but never worked with him.
Vaguely, okay. I do remember him.
Yeah. Real quick, Paul Fredericy and Scooter were good friends. Scooter was my producer. Paul Fredericy produced my show a little bit and some of the other shows. And we all went to Winter Haven. He made the trip with us to Winter Haven, Greg. After Winter Haven, yeah. Okay, now you remember him. Yeah. After Winter Haven, the one year, we went straight to Camden Yards because Grover ended up as the manager of the Baltimore Orioles. Yes. So we flew from Cleveland to Winter Haven, spent a week in Winter Haven, and then went from Winter Haven straight to Baltimore for the opener because the Indians opened up at Camden Yards with Grover as the manager. And I'll never forget, we were staying in a hotel, there in Baltimore. How can I put this? Well, I'll just tell the story. So, Paul's a good looking dude, right? Scooter was always out there, when he was single. We were all single at the time and everything. So, let's just say Paul was the best looking one of the bunch. And the ladies seemed to follow Paul, wherever we went, whether it was in Winter Haven or in Baltimore. And we ran into a unique situation in Baltimore where, let's just say, we escaped a situation that could have been very unique and newsworthy because of the dad in me watching out for both Scooter and Paul Fredericy. How's that? I'll leave it at that. And you can leave it up to your imagination. But the dad in me took over and cleared things up for those two young guys in Baltimore. And we came back safely. I'll just leave it at that. Rob Wanis, David Kelly. I forgot about David Kelly spending time with us at KNR as well back in the day. And
Leroy Kelly's son.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And he's out in, I think, Arizona still doing some stuff.
He's at Tucson, Arizona, I believe.
Okay.
Was doing, I think, University of Arizona sports, maybe. I don't know if he's doing play-by-play, but I know he's doing shows, UA football, basketball, baseball, all that.
Right. So he's still in the business. Greg, you remember David, right?
Yeah, I probably have the greatest KNR story with him. But guys, I'm going to take it to my grave. That's all I'll say. I'm going to have to take this one to my grave.
You can say anything on the R&R podcast.
No. I'm just going to have to take this one.
Now you've got me intrigued.
I'll tell Kenny, like I told you the other story off the air.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this one off the air. All right.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I only need to know one thing.
It's even better than the one I told you last week.
Really?
Okay.
Wow.
Really?
Brenda, how many people other than you know this story that you take to your grave?
Probably just me.
Just you?
That
makes it even all the more intriguing.
Just me.
Okay.
And it really shouldn't go any farther than me and him.
Wow. Okay. All right, fair enough, Greg. Share that with us at another time, and
Yes.
we'll see. I'll talk to David about it maybe, and then see if he wants to tell the story, and then we'll get him on the record. So David Kelly, shout out to you, Chris Kuhn, Jason Whippleman, Paul Tapier. I know we talked about Tolo and Tapier, but he reached out. I think he listened to one of the podcasts, and Paul got me interested in doing voices, guys. That's where, and Michael, what's up, Coach Luke with Michael Regas and all the PX. And so listening to Paul Tapier do voices, it got me interested in trying to do voices and impressions and everything. And over the years, I was able to learn a few and use them over the years, from Coach Luke to our good buddy Charlie Manuel and everything. Hey, Greg, was I a good manager tonight, Greg? Tahita. Was I a good manager, Greg Brinda? How good was Charlie Manuel, guys? I mean, how fun was it to watch and cover Charlie Manuel, Greg?
Oh, Charlie was the best, man. And he just was, you just talk about a guy that you could just walk up to and talk baseball or anything about. You don't find many of those guys today. And Charlie was great. Charlie was unique. Charlie was great.
And he won a World Series with the Philadelphia Phillies as their manager, of course. Not in Cleveland, but
very unheralded manager. Hell of a good baseball man. I mean, a damn good baseball man. And virtually every player that played for him, I thought really, really knew that this guy, late innings, tight games, you can count on Charlie Manuel. And because of the way he came off and kind of Kenny is, with the voice and everything, I don't think he got his just due at what a real good baseball manager he was.
Well, he's got a ring. So that's more than any Indians manager has since 1948. So
that's right.
That's bragging rights right there. And I never forget when they won the World Series in Philadelphia. He said, "Hey, Hornsey, let him know back in Cleveland I won me a World Series."
Hey guys, remember when he had that major health issue? Remember when he had that major health issue in spring training?
Yeah,
and had surgery and had to go. I mean, he was out for a while. That was. That was really something with him.
It was touch and go with him, and whether he'd be back. So, and he's still with us. And I saw him on Twitter not too long ago. He's tweeting. Charlie Manuel is tweeting on Twitter. How about that? Love that. And I'll never forget. They were making him do like a public service. Or no, it wasn't a public service announcement. It was a promo. And one of the players for the Phillies held up the hashtag. And swoosh for Nike. Mm-hmm. And instead of saying, hashtag swoosh, Charlie Manuel said, pound swoosh, because he thought it was the pound sign. That's what he did with that one. So, Charlie, we love you. Andre Knott, Mark Kestashir, Jeff Thomas, three of the greatest individuals you're going to meet. Jeff Thomas, to me, one of the greatest ticker guys and still doing it. 92.3 The Fan, outstanding. Andre Knott has turned his career, into a big moneymaker for him on TV and radio, and he's got a podcast. But Greg, did you get 10% of Mark Kestashir's career earnings since you basically got him the job at ESPN? I want to know that.
Well, I should have, and the answer is no. And he owes me, I think the last count is 2.7 million. And I'm not sure if he's going to ever pay up. But yeah, when I was doing ESPN in the late 90s, early 2000s, one day Mark said, "Hey, would you mind dropping off a tape to the program director?" And I go, "Sure. Hey, anything." Yeah. So I go to Bristol one weekend and I talked to the program director. I said, "Hey, this is one of our ticker guys. He'd like to get in. Here's the tape." And I think it was 2 weeks later, he was introduced his first round of tickers, and the rest is history. And he's really made an amazing, great career for himself, and truly one of the great guys in our business. And I saw him the last time we saw him, guys, was at the NBA Finals. He was doing the game. Actually, he was doing the game with Hubie Brown. And remember, Hubie hurt his knee right before, was it what's it, game 5, Michael, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, either
And he
4 or
ended up
5.
not,
Yep.
yeah, and ended up not doing the game, but Mark
Right.
was there and was doing the finals for ESPN on the radio. And
Yeah. Really good
and
man
good
too.
for
I
him,
mean,
man.
just very personable, and
Yeah,
it's hard to say about anybody in our business, but really, if yet not a thread of ego about him, just
Yep.
very, very thrilled and pleased and humbled to be able to have the kind of job that he does, and I think he's really grown too and developed as a play-by-play guy.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
done a great job. He really has. He's adapted to whatever role that they have put him in, and he waited his time, and he's climbed to the top of the ladder as the #1 radio play-by-play voice for ESPN for NBA games. So kudos to Kesty, a job well done. Some other names: the High Rise, Ken Silverstein, Chris Fedor, Will Burge. Dave DiNatale came a little later, but we got to give Dino a shout out. He was listening. How about the mayor, Dave Urbach? Do we all remember Dave Urbach? And what
Yeah.
I mean, phenomenal guy. And Dave Fest, his what do you have, like an apartment overlooking the flats, and we would go
no.
for
He was
Dave
in the
Fest?
Bratnall place. One Bratnall place.
Okay, all right, there you go.
One
Yeah.
Bratnall place.
Dave Urbach, the mayor. If Frank Mancini was on
Yeah,
scholarship, what was
right.
Dave Urbach on? Is what I want to know, guys. Right?
Urbach was great, man. He was a good dude. Still around, but yeah,
Yep.
he lived in that apartment overlooking Lake Erie and Bratnall, and yeah, it was one Bratnall place. I remember things like that where rich people live, you know.
You
So
do.
You mentioned the name too here. I really enjoyed Will Burge and
Yeah.
Kenny. He produced for us,
Yes.
and now we're getting in a little. This isn't in the '90s, but I really thought Will, number one, just he innately had a great sense of what's good on radio, what's not good on radio. And I always thought, Kenny, that he did a real nice job putting us in the best position as far as subject matter
Yeah.
for a guest, how we want to approach things, and then ultimately Will got his own show.
Right.
Recently, not recently, but toward the end of his run at KNR, and he had his own show as a talk show host, and I thought he again, really rose through the ranks well, and deserved everything he got because he was conscientious and did a hell of a good job for us.
I agree with you. Loved working with Will Burge, and my favorite boss of all time, Steve Legursky. All right, so Frank Mancini's on scholarship. Dave Urbach's the mayor. Steve Legursky always on vacation. Am I right or am I right, guys? God bless his wife, Mary. You talk about, hitting it out of the park, out kicking your coverage and having a great life, Greg Brinda. Steve Legursky, I guess you would call him Mr. Vacation, wouldn't you?
yeah, well, and he had like 9 degrees, including he had a law degree. He didn't practice law. He was the most educated program director ever. I'll give you a quick Steve Legursky story. So it's the day before 9/11, and Legursky, I was the sports director, and Steve had to go to do some seminar at Cleveland State on 9/11. So the day before, he comes to me, he goes, "Hey, I'm going to be gone tomorrow, and you really can't call me." He said, "The only way I want you to call me is if the world comes to an end." That was his words. Call me only if the world is coming to an end. And we saw what happened on the morning after. And I made that call and I said, "Go look at your TV. The world's coming to an end."
Unfortunately.
And he goes, "What?" I said, "Go look at your TV."
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget when he said, "Don't call me unless the world's coming to an end." How about that for irony?
It seemed like it was. Absolutely. Yeah. The Legs, loved working under Legs. My favorite boss of all time there at WKNR. Got to give a shout out to Gino. Gino, I love you, Gino. Gene Winters, who produced for me and others at KNR, and then followed Bruce. Mornings with Drennan on KNR and
Until I got
Olszewski.
Oh.
So God bless Bruce, and Bruce is still doing his thing on, what was it? Fox Sports Ohio, Sports Time Ohio, now Bally's Great Lakes, and still doing the show and everything like that. And I'm not sure if Gino's still producing for him or not. No, he's
not any longer, but Gino was with him for many years when that the television side started for Drennan. Yeah.
Right. I think Gino might be with either the Browns or the Cavaliers now, doing some work for those. So a shout out to both of those guys as we take a trip down memory lane.
Hey, Kenny, one more guy. I'm going to take this. I knew you wouldn't. We're going to forget him.
Who?
All right.
Who'd I forget?
I knew you were going to forget him. I'm keeping him in my back pocket. Should we do it now or should we do it after the break?
Let's do it after the break. We'll find out who I forgot, and we'll talk about the best or the most memorable callers we dealt with at WKNR over the years as well, when the R&R podcast continues with special guest Greg Brinda.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of the Swing and a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading,
and from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show,
the sports podcast for the sports collector.
Hi, my name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomenal CBD Store and PhenomenalCBD.com. That's like phenomenal, CBD.com. Tune in where we talk with experts about how the amazing hemp plant can make a difference for people's health and well-being from the Press Play Podcast Network.
And we continue with the R&R podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Kenny Rhoda, Michael Regai with you, and our special guest is Greg Brinda. We're looking back at 30 years of WKNR radio. It all started in 1991, and Greg Brinda was a part of that opening day lineup that we talked about in the first couple of episodes of this podcast. But Greg, you have one person that of all these names that I've tried to put together that I forgot that worked with us at WKNR. Who am I forgetting?
You forgot Kevin Keene.
Kevin Keene, that's right. One of the most high-strung individuals I have ever met in my life.
Kenny, I would say this about Kevin Keene, and Reg, I think you might agree. We could put Kevin Keene into a room and say, Kevin, start talking for 4 hours and then come out. He would talk for 4 straight hours and not be exhausted. I've never met anybody in our business, guys, that literally could just talk and talk and talk and talk and not be tired of himself. I mean, I get tired of me in about 10 minutes, but he could just talk and talk and talk. Kevin Keene. I think he became a teacher after he got out of our business.
Well, didn't he ultimately then become a sports talker at TAM, Greg?
I think he did. Yeah. He did. Yeah.
Thanks for jogging the memory, Greg. And now that you met, that's the thing. Once I hear a name or saw somebody on social media or you bring it up, then boom, it's like, oh, Mr. Energy. I mean, he was like the Energizer Bunny. Just wind him up and let him go. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, Kevin. I apologize, but glad we got you in there, Kevin Keene. Hey, Greg, and we'll get to the callers here in a second. Larry Kelton, he was part of the morning show at
Larry Kelton was part of the initial venture into sports talk with Sindelar. He did Afternoon Drive.
Okay.
And then somewhere, I think in May or June, I think it was June, he made a serious mistake on the air that literally cost him his job by the end of the day. And he was done, and we've never heard from him again.
Because one of our callers asked about him via social media recently, and that, of course, is Hiram, who has called all of our shows over the years, and we've all had heated debates, interesting conversations with Hiram, but he was asking about Larry Kelton. So I figured if anybody would know, would be you, Dean, since you were part of the original starting lineup back in 1991.
Yeah, he was there before it actually started. And
well, that's when Bill Needle heard him, right? Bill Needle heard him say what he said, and then Needle came into management and said, I can do this.
You just can't do this.
Right. Yeah. That's great. Jugdish, my buddy Jugdish.
You really can't say that.
So because of what Larry Kelton said, we got Bill Needle. So in a way, it kind of, even though what he said was wrong, it worked out since we all loved Bill Needle and working with him. All right, guys, I'm going to start with you, Greg, and then Michael, you take it. Favorite callers over the years, Brinda, or most despicable callers, or however you want to talk about the callers over the years.
Well, I hated Hiram.
Hiram may want to have a steel cage match with you, Brinda.
I could not stand Hiram at all. But Dumpling was like, I always wanted Dumpling to call after a Cavs game just for him to call, because he was a sweetheart, man. He really was. He was a good soul. And he was a great sports fan, and somehow he finagled his way in becoming part of the media. I don't know how that ever happened, but he was a good dude, man. He really was, and he passed away some years ago. In fact, John Telich and I went to his house where they were having a little after the funeral ceremony, and I think his mom and everybody there appreciated us being there. And I absolutely would have done it a million times, because he was just such a great guy.
He had one of the most unique voices of all time. And we all do it. And I'm going to do it now because it brings back great memories. He would call you up and you'd be talking about something and he would just interrupt you, Greg. And he'd go, Brinda, you don't know nothing about sports, Greg, Brinda. Right? And those Cavaliers, he called, not the Cavaliers, they were those Cavaliers, Brinda. What's wrong with those Cavaliers, Brinda? And he would call you, and it was radio gold whenever he called, wasn't it, Greg?
He was radio gold, man. And he was everywhere, knew everybody. He just be there. He just show up. It was incredible.
Michael, what about you?
Well, one of my favorites, just because could tell that he, really earnestly cared and probably thought sports had a little bit more profound meaning than they should have. Our buddy Dick in Dayton. Kenny, and you do it better than me, of course, but hey, Michael, how you doing today? It just made me smile and feel good every time he called. So
he still calls me on WHBC. Oh, the other day he called, Kenny, how are ya?
Yep.
And he's calling and writing letters and sending cards and still doing it.
Beautiful.
Over the years. So he's one of a kind. No question about that. So Dick and Dayton, Dumpling, and we got to mention the Bostonian, don't we?
Oh, yes.
That's what I was just going to say next. Yeah, I mean, just a Back Bay Boston, whether it's the Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Patriots. Hell, he'd even grab obscure colleges that were in Massachusetts or New England, and they were always the best. And he'd always tell me, Greg, you know that none of the Cleveland teams are as good as the Boston teams. So that would be his, virtually all the time. So he was fun. I had a lot of fun with him, and even got his, and he had that, looked like he had that, the bangs.
Yeah.
The Mo Howard cut.
Very good, Greg. He had the Mo Howard cut.
The Mo Howard cut,
and
yes.
was always ready to stir it up. So for that, I really enjoyed Bostonian, yeah.
One of the callers I remember, not to my show, but to Sindelar's show. Remember Bengal would always call him?
Oh,
remember
yeah.
Bengal?
Yeah.
And Greg,
That's
Bengal
right,
would
yes.
talk how great Cincinnati was this and
Right.
Cincinnati was that and everything. And he'd say something ridiculous or whatever. And Sindelar would go, "That's all. Goodbye. You're gone." And he'd hang up on him. But then Jeff would take him right back the next time he called, and they'd have that same conversation, from back in the day. So, that the Bengal was one I'll never forget. I was doing updates, and Sindelar would just have so much fun with him. And funny guys, working with JT at 1480 WHBC in Canton, I still get calls from the Bostonian, from Hiram, and from Dick and Dayton to this day.
Wow.
That's
Still getting calls, from those guys. They're still listening to Sports Talk Radio. And that's why we got to thank all the loyal listeners. Greg, you're at WTAM now. I'm down in Kent, and yet these guys are still listening to us. Michael, they're still watching you call games because your name, Dick and Dayton, brings your name up all the. Does Michael ever ask about me, Kenny? And I'll tell him yes.
Tell him yes. Don't tell him that I had him 6 feet under, though, please.
I won't tell him that.
Don't tell him that. Just tell him, I asked about him and wish him the best.
Yeah, without question. So, some of the callers, there's so many over the years that we could go back and talk about. And we thank you all for being loyal listeners, for pissing us off, agreeing with us, disagreeing with us, whatever it was. It was part of the show and made what we do a lot of fun. And guys, last thing, Jim Rome tour stops. I just had to write this down and bring this up before we get out of here. Jim Rome was a part of our station, right? But
Right.
he wasn't local, but still he was a part of it. And then he did 3 different tour stops, as he called them, and basically sold out the Convocation Center twice. And we had what, Greg, 10, 12, 15,000 at Blossom the one year too?
Yeah, I remember going to the one at Blossom, which was pretty amazing to see how many people would come to one of these. In his prime, in his heyday,
Yeah.
he had a great gig going, man. More power to him. He made the best of a great he's still doing stuff, but those are the meat and potato days of his career. And he certainly made the best of it. He really did.
That tour stop we had at Blossom, we had Carmen Policy, Zadrunas Ilgauskas,
I know,
Mike
right?
Fratello, Chris Spielman, I think was there. We had the who's who, right, in Cleveland sports, past and present, show up for this thing. And it was videotaped and then shown on Fox Sports Ohio. That's how big of a deal it was back in the day. So I just wanted to make sure we brought up Jim Rome before we, wind things down here. All right, Greg, as we bring to a close this anniversary look back 30 years at WKNR starting back in 1991, final thoughts from you and Michael before we get out of here.
Well, it was, I was there for 26 years, most of my broadcast life, good times. There were some not so good times, but for the most part, it was a neat place to work because, we started there when sports talk radio was just starting to roll. You had the Fan coming on the air in 87, and then other stations kind of followed from that. And we were literally right there as an all sports station, one of the very first all sports stations. But I think, guys, the most I'm proud about is during those few years when we were kind of left to fend for ourselves, we kind of kept everything afloat and made it possible for someone to buy something that still existed and still had a great name and still had a great reputation of doing something really good in the market. And it's still rolling today.
Michael, what about you?
Well, Kenny and Greg, you two, to me, were, along with Sindelar, were the largest part of that, without question. And Greg, I couldn't agree with you more. You more than kept it alive and kept it afloat. You gave it an opportunity to continue to, first of all, just stay there and give the Cleveland sports fans what they were looking for on a daily basis, but then had it grow. I said the first show a couple of weeks ago, the decade of the 90s, again, with YouTube being such a large part of it, with Sindelar, Needle, and the BSK, to me now, that's what I'm always going to remember about KNR. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not that big on the current situation going at KNR. I went back there and did shows for them because they wanted me to. Fine, that's great. But, I feel the 90s and going into the 2000s and even on into the early 2000s was the heyday. That, 14, 15 years of KNR. I stand by that. That's the way I feel. It ain't going to change. I'm sure others will disagree with me. That's fine. That's cool. But that's the way I feel. I don't feel there anything that in this market that has gotten close to that decade. I wasn't a regular guy there, and I'm a play-by-play guy, calling games, calling the Cavaliers, the Baltimore Orioles, and college football and basketball. But I love being there. I love being there when they wanted me to be there, to do Browns and Cavs post-game shows, to fill in when needed. And you two were a very, very large part of that because your impact, I think you'll, as you continue to go on, your impact, you both should be very, very proud of that you had on making that sports station one of the best in the country.
Well,
Greg,
thanks, Reg. And
thanks,
like I said,
Reg.
we had a lot of fun and we worked really hard at it, and you played a big part in it too. I'd always wonder, how in the world are you doing Cavs and baseball? And I go, my God. I mean, just the sheer preparation per game times a couple hundred a year is crazy. It really is, man. That's just,
well, thank you. But
it's really hard work.
Passion, but labor of love, right? I mean,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm a very lucky guy to have. It was a total of counting the two of them over 20 years with that. So, but again, just feel very, very good about what you two had, a strong, standard of what you help establish at KNR, because I don't think it's been met yet in this market. Again, that's my opinion. Many will disagree, but I don't think it's been met, and either by that station or any other sports station in the market. So kudos to you both for being a large part of it.
Well, the one thing that for me, guys, it was the perfect storm. It was starting up a all sports talk station in Cleveland, right, Greg? The Indians getting a new home, the Cavaliers getting a new home, the Browns moving. Think about, right when we started rolling, Greg and Michael, right? I mean, you talk about things to talk about. There was never a dull moment, good or bad, during that time in the 90s, from 91, through 99. Let's just take the 90s and what we had to talk about and how we were able to be on top of everything. And, it was something new to the market. And I'm proud to say I was part of it in its infancy, and that it's still around, even though I'm not there anymore.
Well, think about this, guys. We're the station that has the Indians in 95, and we're coming out of a World Series to the Browns leaving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you think of any market having that kind of sports content in a very short period of time like that?
No.
I don't, right?
No.
No.
It was,
and just 2 years earlier when they cut Bernie, I'll still never forget the day. Back then there was no email or text, there was faxes. And I remember the fax machine literally non-stopping for 24 hours. And I grabbed a huge box and I brought it home to my wife and I said, "This is Bernie Kosar." And she looked and she goes, "What's that?" I goes, "These are all faxes in the last 24 hours. It was crazy."
Yeah. And then from that fax machine that you took those from to breaking the fax machine of Paul Tagliabue and the NFL office
Right.
when the
Right.
Browns moved, right?
Right.
And some people might be listening. What's a fax, Greg Brinda? What are you talking about? What's a fax
Right.
machine?
Right.
No email, no iPhones, no text messages. No, that's how some things, were sent back and forth. Contracts for players and teams, as well as, that was email before email became the norm and everything. So, hey guys, this has been a lot of fun, really big enough to do 3 parts of this. I'm sure we could do more, but I think this is good enough, taking a look back at 30 years of WKNR radio, looking back to the first 15 or so when it started from 91. And we all were a part of it and proud to be a part of it back then. Greg, thanks for making time wait, let me do it right, Michael, before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Greg Brinda. Greg Brinda.
The prize
Gridiron
guy.
Greg. Gridiron Greg predicts.
That's right.
So many great stories.
Yeah.
Like I said, I got more stories for you off the air, Rhoda. You'll
All right.
appreciate them. But I got to take this call from Dick from Dayton first. Okay.
Okay, you go do that. There he is, the Dean of Sports, Greg Brinda. Thanks for coming
Great
on,
job,
Reg.
Greg.
Always
job.
fun, Reg. We'll do this again real soon. Next thing we're going to be talking about, we're going to talk Cavaliers, since they got the 3rd overall pick now in this draft. We found out tonight as we're taping this. We'll talk some Indians, see if they have enough players to finish the season with, if everybody else doesn't get hurt. And then, of course, the Brown season coming up, Reg, should be a lot of fun this year.
No doubt about that. So, we'll see if Kobe Altman still has a job. Let's see what he does with that 3rd overall pick. I'll be 100% sure that he'll be the one making the pick. But I'm glad they got a top 3. Getting, because they're going to need that and then some to get where everybody wants them to be.
Without question. All right, Reg, we'll do this again soon on the R&R podcast. Greg, thanks so much. Dave Emmert, great job producing this madness. Hopefully everybody enjoyed our look back, a trip down memory lane. If we forgot anybody else, email me, text me, call me. I apologize. We tried to get as many people in as we could, looking back on the beginning of WKNR 30 years ago in 1991.